It's now time for Two Useless Organisms with your hosts, Michael Jackson and Butthole Man.
It is hilarious.
Welcome to Two Useless Organisms, a silly topical show where two useless organisms discuss today's hot topics, drink each other's philosophy juice, and read the internet's most unbelievable Yelp reviews. On today's show, we will discuss unexpected phases and the history of podcasting. Keep in mind that Two Useless Organisms is not safe for work and shouldn't be talked about around the dinner table with your children unless you don't care what your children fucking listen to on it. Tristan, you're eating soup?
I
But you
was
have a
killing
fork though.
I was killing hookers on Grand Theft Auto when I was like 8 years old. So
When I was 7, nerd.
my parents would have let me listen to Two Useless Organisms.
Yeah.
But even better, they let me host it. So
Yeah.
anywho, yeah, I'm eating some ramen here because I'm what you'd call poor and on a tight time
Yeah.
schedule. I don't want to be up all night recording this dumb podcast. So I'm knocking out two things
Yeah.
at once.
Yeah,
And
me neither. Two stones with one bird.
yeah, we're killing two hookers with one car.
Ramen bowl.
Ramen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Anywhoozy.
yeah.
But you could call this fancy ramen because, yeah, it's just the microwave stuff, but I did put some extra chicken seasoning in it. So,
Yeah. That's amazing.
anyway, I'm poor.
Yeah, me too.
How you doing, Tom? You doing good?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. A couple days ago, or was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. I was at the barber, and I was thinking about the topic that we had on our last show. If text goes out that nuclear strike's gonna hit in 10 minutes. I was thinking about what if that happened in the middle of my haircut. You know, like he's mid haircut, which it normally takes at least 45 minutes the way he works on me. So I'm like, what if, I'm mid haircut and am I just gonna die with an unfinished haircut and I'm not gonna have time to leave my barber to go see anyone important. I'm just gonna hang out at his house for the last 10 minutes of my life. You know? He was a good guy though.
Oh, yeah, Jimmy, right?
Wait, no. Jimmy, I'm not sure where you got that name.
I'm not sure you know your barber's name.
I guess I don't, but
Your mom's name is Barbara, though. That's pretty close to Barbara.
Yep, that is correct.
Anyway,
Should we just jump into topic number 1?
let's jump in your very angsty topic here. It's not a phase, Mom.
Yeah. So I was having a weird, when I was reflecting on my 2022, I was thinking about how I went through like some phases last year that I wasn't ever expecting to happen. And, I kind of want to dive deep into, what are some phases you've gone through that were unexpected? Now in 2022, I moved to a new work location. My previous one had a bit of an older demographic. People my age, but also mainly people in their 30s or even much older. Last year I went to a location where most of the demographic was my age or even slightly younger. Like I'm in my mid to late 20s. Some of these people are in their mid to early 20s and
Uh-oh.
would invite me out to certain clubs and things that I never even liked, but I was actually kind of getting into drinking and going partying. I talked about I think the last episode or no, the episode before the last one, how I need to start getting control of my alcoholism, and this year is when it started to kick off. And it would start because they would take me to places like Cowboys in Orlando, a very big line dancing bar, and for whatever reason, I never had a bad time there. And it didn't make sense because it was a big country bar, very homophobic vibes. It's about, over in half an hour from where I live. Yet I never had a bad time whenever I went there. There was even someone that accidentally pissed on my shoe, and I was like, it'd be like that sometimes. And, I just kind of vibed. I don't know why I had and enjoyed my cowboy phase, but I'm happy to say that I have not been there since this summer, and I don't really plan on going back.
All right. I have a question.
Yes.
We've been buddies a long time. We host a podcast where we can talk about literally whatever we want.
Yeah.
You never told me someone pissed on your shoe.
You know, I was very drunk and it didn't seem that significant to me. So it was at the urinals. So, the urinals are, tight knit, whatever. And the person that was at the urinal next to me kind of missed. And, it actually got a little bit on my skin leg because, I cuff up my jeans. So he was like, oh, sorry. And I think I was too drunk to give a shit. But thankfully, I always carry around some nice Bath and Body Works hand sanitizer. So when I went to wash my hands, I dabbed some on thick layers of paper towels and just rubbed my leg, where the pee-pee went, where the stranger pee-pee went. And when I went home, I took a long shower.
What's that hand sanitizer? Was it mahogany teakwood?
It wasn't mahogany teakwood. It might have been cucumber lemon or my blackberry basil. I will go and spend like $30 at a time on pocket backs that will last me a few months.
Yeah,
I
that
get a
should go
variety
down.
of flavors.
Can you hear my chewing?
Honestly, not really.
Okay, good, because I edit this son of a bitch and I really don't want to do more work later. Okay, so you went through your Cowboys phase.
Yes.
Nothing to be
What
ashamed of, Tommy.
It'd be like that sometimes. Sometimes you have to go to a line dance, and that's one of the big things. It's a line dancing bar. Um, Now I got nothing against dancing, but it's not really my thing. But people be like, let's try to do the line dance or whatever, and it would be random shit. So, and I didn't really ever care to learn. I would just kind of drunkenly attempt to step along with everyone, and that would be my thing. I remember one of my friends who loved Cowboys was like, "Okay, we're going to Cowboys on my birthday. You're gonna learn Footloose," and I straight up told her, "I am not going to learn Footloose, but I will pretend to try to figure it out when it comes on." And she was like, understood.
I will pretend
Tristan,
to try to figure it out.
yes,
The autobiography of Tommy Guerrera.
that's, it's gotten me this far. Tristan, do you have a fun, unexpected phase you went through in
Yeah, you're
2022, maybe even 2021?
it is no, it'll be a 2022.
Oh,
Your hand sanitizer spending
yeah.
actually reminded me of it, even though it was going to be my topic anyway.
Oh,
In 2022, I went through a phase of being financially stupid. And I believe we talked about, and we might have talked about that on a previous episode. Anyway, I did. Yeah, we did, because I added up my finances late last year to kind of cover to see where I spent money for the whole year. Let's just say I operated at a net loss. I was in the red, as the accountants say, and the amount of money I spent on traveling was the same as the amount of money I spent on fast food and snacks, which also just happened to be the exact amount of money I lost last year.
that, that was a little bit too real.
Yeah. So the way I thought about it is, if I hadn't have spent so much money on snacks and fast food, I would have broke even. If I hadn't have spent all that money on traveling, I would have broke even. I
But
didn't
how are
break
you
even.
gonna not travel or get snacks and fast food?
Well, let me tell you how I've been living the last 2 months of my life.
Okay.
By not traveling and not getting snacks or fast food, my weekly grocery budget is $50 or less. I go out of my way now to go to a gas station that has a little bit cheaper gas than most of the other places. And I spend no extra money.
I wish I could do that. I need to learn self-control.
It's ridiculously hard and sad.
Yeah.
I eat ramen every day. I eat mac and cheese most days. Sometimes with peanut butter and jelly if I'm really treating myself.
Yeah. I need to get on top of that. My finances are in the shithole. If I could somehow spend $50 or less on groceries, that would be great. Where do you go grocery shopping?
That's the thing. Target.
Target. Okay.
It's a little bit more expensive there, which makes it even harder.
Oh,
But the other side of the coin is here. I have extremely low standards when it comes to food and
true.
what I want to eat. So I would say 95% of the meals I eat at home are microwave or air fryer food or
Gotcha.
oven food. Really
Okay.
quick, no effort. You're on the other
Yeah.
side. You like to make things, Tommy.
Yeah. I
And
do
might
like
I
to
add,
make things, but I've also been very lazy and tired recently, so that's been leading me to spend a lot of money on garbage. Um, although this leads me into one unexpected phase that I got into, because of how terrible my health got at one point. I started getting into oatmeal. That's not something I ever imagined I would even try at any point. Um, but I learned different ways to make some decent oatmeal, and I left kind of satisfied. Did a little, threw some honey and cinnamon with some berries and bananas. Added some mixed nuts for a little extra crunch, and it made it somewhat more edible.
it's the little things, Tommy.
Yeah.
My girlfriend, I know I've talked about this on the show before. My girlfriend taught me a trick with ramen. Cook
Okay.
2 eggs in the ramen, right?
Hmm.
Like the Japaneses do.
Yeah.
And then put some sriracha on that. And it makes eating ramen every day a lot less miserable because you spiced it up a little bit. You added some giblets to it. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
Only what I mean, the thing of ramen costs like 35 cents. 2 eggs probably costs something like the same.
Yeah.
And a splash of sriracha. That's a meal that's still probably less than $1.
Yeah. I need to start having me some broke ass food. If you guys have any good suggestions for broke ass food, leave it in the comment section down below. Um, the only other unexpected phase that I went through last year was probably Horror Nights. I it in my head I was gonna get a frequent fear pass for my first time, but like it was still like somewhat of an impulsive decision, and then it ended up being hardcore my personality. It's still kind of my personality in a way. Um, Also the World Cup. With it being in Qatar, I was hoping to not get into it, but I unfortunately love football too much and got really into that when that was happening. Tristan, any other phases you went through?
No, I don't think I went through any phases. I mean, the spending was really all of it. I can
Yeah.
go into more detail about where the money went. Most of it, like I said, a lot of it was traveling, and I traveled all sorts of places last year. I think I went over this before, but I traveled to Illinois 3 times, New York twice, Minnesota once, Texas once, the Bahamas twice, Mexico once, Vegas once. Yeah. So
All right.
buy money. But yeah, so it's not a phase, Mom. It's not a
Yeah.
phase.
Well, speaking of eating high class, today's sponsor is the Flavors and Scents of Rome. Want to make some delicious Italian food? The Flavors and Scents of Rome. Thank you for sponsoring Two Useless Organisms.
All right, and we're back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Smells and tastes
And flavors, yeah.
and flavors of Rome.
Some basil.
Basil a popular thing in Rome? What is that leaf? What is basil? I don't even know what basil is.
Yeah. You know it.
I think I had a tea with basil in it once.
Oh, a tea with basil.
I believe so.
I actually want to try that.
Is it the
It's
Grand
a,
Floridian?
oh,
That Beauty and the Beast
oh,
thing they got there.
oh, oh. That sounds very romantic.
I'd love to go to Rome. If I had to pick one place that wasn't a
Yeah.
Disney park outside of the States, it would probably be Rome.
Yeah. My roommates took a Mediterranean cruise and they spent a couple of days in Rome before and after, and they fell in love with Rome. One in particular really, really fell in love with it. And the more he talks about that trip, the more I just want to spend even more money I don't have to do that.
I've always been saying I think we need a Roman Coliseum type event again where criminals, and I might be directly ripping this off of like a George Carlin bit or something, but where criminals, the most violent of the violent, go in and just kill each other in front of a crowd of 50,000 people, and then you can also televise it, charge people to watch it, make a lot of money.
As long as we can also throw in like pedophiles and rapists
and reality TV stars.
Yeah, because like, you take like some pedophiles with some like people that actually know how to kill, adults. That'd be pretty fun, I think.
That's probably the best combination right there, because if I wanted to see a pedophile get killed, because they're probably the lowest of the low,
Oh yeah.
I would want to see them torn apart and dismembered, but kept alive as long as possible.
Yeah. I
And
feel
you
like
would
I
need
hate
an experienced killer to do that.
exactly. And like I feel like, you randomly come across like, prison type of threads online or whatever. And I feel like they always say that, that there is like kind of a system like, of like people's reputations based on their crime, and anyone who's a pedophile is always at the bottom and they get beat up all the time. Like even more so than anyone else. So in a setting where they could get killed, that'd be exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love that.
Kill all the rapists.
Oh,
Like Brock Turner.
I forgot about him. Yeah.
Yep,
Wow.
he was not in prison long enough.
Yeah, but that's another topic.
Ho, ho, ho.
But anywhoosy, heck yeah, it's not a phase, mom. Smells and scents and tastes and things of Rome. My topic here, history. Okay.
Okay.
So I like history. In our other podcast, I usually do a little history lesson, our theme park podcast.
Called Tristery.
Tristery. So I figured we might do a little bit of tristery here today. I believe the only other episode we did history here was actually Three Guys Without the Whys. It might have been episode 1, History of Taco Bell. You remember that, Tommy? I went into
That was a great segment.
Went into depth about
I
Taco Bell.
love Taco Bell.
But this is actually slightly more interesting than Taco Bell. So history of podcasts.
Fuck, I want Taco Bell right now.
Yeah,
Anyways,
so do I,
sorry.
but I'm poor.
Anyway,
I'm poor.
Yeah, me too.
Can't even
And
afford the dollar
also,
menu.
There's a reason I got this right now.
Why? Because you're preparing to be a mall Santa later this year?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting really gray hair and everything. History of podcasts.
History of podcasts. So this is a relatively new medium, as most people know. I mean, a lot of our listeners over the age of 40 probably even know what the hell a podcast is. You'd have to say, like, remember what Walter Cronkite did? It's like that, but on the internet. And they'd be like, oh, back in my day. But anywho, I'll just read it from my little thing I typed up here. Blogging has its roots in the 1980s with simple text entries being made on web pages, and supposedly some of these blog entries, Tommy, whatever you're doing right now.
Sorry.
What is that?
It's a laser pointer that I have. Anyway, I'm very sorry.
We're going to keep that in the video versions. You're going to have to check this out on YouTube, folks, to see the LSD thing that I just saw on Tommy's screen. All right.
I'm going to keep doing it while you talk.
Keep doing it. I don't mind. I think it's fun.
Word.
So, yeah, blogging has its roots in the 1980s with simple text entries being made on web pages, and supposedly some of these blog entries were audio files. So that in its own is kind of constitutes as what a podcast is today, all the way back in the 1980s. I couldn't find any specific people or shows from that time, but it would be about 20 years until the medium of podcasting would really begin anyway. In 2004, something called an RSS feed, which stands for Really Simple Syndication, was implemented, which allows one web address to periodically add new audio files. Now, the term podcast is a reference to the iPod, simply describing a way to listen to a pre-recorded broadcast. The iPod debuted in 2001, and in 2004, video jockey Adam Curry and software developer Dave Weiner created a program called iPodder, which is a way for people to download audio blogs to their iPod. Later that same year, a podcast host site called Libsyn was created by University of Pittsburgh students David Cheekin, Matthew Hoops, Martin Mulligan, and David Mansueto. And the program is still the most popular podcast host site in the industry. Podcasts became popular that year, and by 2005, Apple added podcast to iTunes, and podcast was named the word of the year by the New Oxford American Dictionary. So that kind of gives you an idea of how new it really is. If it was made word of the year in 2005, they wouldn't make something that's been around a long time word of the year. So it really only became prominent in 2004, 2005. So the growth of podcasting since then. In September of 2004, there were only 24 Google results for the word podcast. Can you imagine Googling anything and only 24 results came up?
Jeez.
Yeah, I found this in a really interesting article today. At the beginning of October, very next month, there were 2,750 hits, which grew exponentially every few days. By October 18th, less than 3 weeks later, there were more than 100,000 hits for the word podcast. Jeez. 2 months went from 24 Google results to over 100,000. Just think about how quickly that, and then the number even gets bigger.
Oh, yeah, I believe it.
In 2007, Ricky Gervais broke a record with his podcast episodes having an average of 250,000 downloads each. Shortly after, Adam Carolla made a Guinness World Record with total downloads of 60 million, although Gervais actually had about 5 times as many downloads at the time. For some reason, Guinness didn't acknowledge that. And, some drama there. But by 2013, 1 billion people were subscribed to podcasts. In 2014, the Serial podcast was launched and reached 68 million downloads by the end of the first season. Now, Serial is a very popular podcast about like investigative journalism, stuff like that. Kind of a true crime thing to it, which obviously true crime became, I think, the most popular podcast thing later. But now the New York Times released the Daily podcast in 2017, and in May of 2019, it had the highest unique monthly U.S. listeners of any podcast. By January of the next year, it was receiving 2 million downloads a day. Joe Rogan currently leads the world in podcast downloads, with Joe himself claiming in 2019 that he received 190 million downloads a month. I actually do believe that's true.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan. I like Joe Rogan. He doesn't seem like a guy who would inflate his numbers for fun. He's pretty down to earth guy. Now, he would later sign a $100 million contract with Spotify for them to exclusively host his podcast.
Where's our $100 million is what I want to know.
Dude, I'm fighting for us to get $12.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
I really am. It's hard to give a little bit more behind the scenes, kind of like we did in our last episode, behind the scenes of sustaining a podcast. You really have to break through and get to people for them to listen to your show. And it's so weird because you're creating a free product and you're putting it out for absolutely nothing, and it's still so hard to get people to kind of close this out. I'll kind of talk about some of my favorite podcasts, which I think we did actually in a previous Three Guys Without the Wise episode, but that was a few years ago. So some new answers in here. I got some favorite podcasts here. Connecting with Walt. It's my favorite Disney history podcast. Wonderful. Highly recommend it. Tuesdays with Stories is actually one of the inspirations for this podcast to me, because it's just two comedians, Mark Norman and Joe List, who just every week talk about whatever. It's completely topical. There's no target audience, which is same for us basically. Creating Disney Magic and Come Rain or Shine are two leadership podcasts, actually hosted by father-son Lee Cockerell and Dan Cockerell, two former Disney executives.
That's a good one. You told me about that one.
The WDW Radio, which is Walt Disney World Radio. Actually, that podcast came out, I believe, in the early 2000s, and it's still going strong today. Hosted by Lou Mangello. Highly recommend that one too if you're a Disney person. The Monday Morning Podcast is another basically topical podcast from comedian Bill Burr. He puts out 2 episodes a week. And then Buzzcast. Now, Buzzcast is a podcast that I just got into a few weeks ago, and I've been binging those episodes like crazy. It's only about 3 or 4 years old, but it's by the podcast host site Buzzsprout. And they put out an episode every once in a while simply about podcasting. And Buzzsprout is actually the host site that we use to put this podcast out. So hearing those people just simply talk about podcasting tips, podcasting news, different features that their host site has, different features that Spotify is using, that Apple Podcasts is using, blah, blah, blah. It's been really interesting, and it's been helping me learn kind of how to do this better. So Tommy, I know you're having a rave over there like you're at Cowboys right now. Hopefully no one's pissing on your shoe, except I know your cat's probably in there somewhere, so you never know.
Nope, the pee paws are not in here.
Okay, good. What are
Yep,
some of your favorite
no pee
podcasts?
paws. All right, so one podcast, it's a brand new podcast as of this recording. They only have one official episode. It is Growing Up with Devin, and that is Devin Werkheiser, who you may know better as Ned Bigby from Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. He just started his own podcast where, he told us he gave us survival tips on how to get through middle school. And now he has a podcast about growing up and talking about life. His first episode, he had a conversation with, I feel so bad because I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, but the guy that played Cookie
Mhm.
on the show.
Eddie Murphy.
And, what was that?
Eddie Murphy.
It was not Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm about to look this up right now because I have Spurtify up. Daniel Curtis Lee. Daniel Curtis Lee was his
Eddie
name.
Murphy.
And I don't know if he's going to be on future episodes or if he's just going to interview a different person each episode or what. But I really enjoyed that first episode. It was really nice. The other two podcasts I listen to, also niche subject matters of mine. Also, hold on. My AirPod is good. Okay. Avatar Braving the Elements. That is a podcast about Avatar The Last Airbender. It is hosted by the voice of Zuko, Dante Bosco, as well as the voice of Korra from Legend of Korra, and I'm forgetting her name off the top of my head. I feel bad about that.
Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, Eddie Murphy. And they pretty much run through every episode. They kind of like talk about, what went into those episodes. They'll also have they'll also have a special guest on certain episodes. Like I remember the episode where they watched the introduction of King Boomy, the guy that voiced him was a special guest on that one. They've also just had episodes that weren't about Avatar episodes. Like they just had full on interviews with martial arts people that helped, figure out like the martial arts movements that they used in Avatar to figure out what bending. It's a really, really cool podcast, especially if you're into that universe. I'm a big fan of it. I mean, I even have my one and only tattoo is the White Lotus Pai Sho tile. And then the other podcast that I listen to is the Sessions with Renee Paquette. Renee Paquette, she is married to professional wrestler John Moxley. She's also been on television. She was a commentator in WWE and an interviewer in WWE, but now she works with AEW, I believe. But she also has her own podcasts where she just has different interviews with different wrestlers or wrestling personalities, and it's a really fun, interesting podcast to listen to, at least for me. For me, probably not for someone that doesn't like wrestling. Those are probably the three that I'm very into right now. I'm really excited to see where Growing Up with Devin goes. Like that one's been that was a fun first episode.
Yeah, I love Eddie
Like,
Murphy.
yeah.
But I want to give 4 quick podcast shout outs here. 2 of them are ones we've mentioned before. That would be Scooter and the Big Man, our good friend Brian,
Hey,
and
yo.
his other hosts, PJ and I don't know, Jimmy or something. Their New York Mets themed podcast. Tall Tom's Thought Train, our good friend Tom, who's been a lifelong listener of our show. Tall Tom's Thought Train. And then these 2 I just got into over the last couple of weeks. This one's called Beyond the Edge, a sequential entertainment podcast. And it's just, I think it's like basically a comedy troupe from Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
And each episode is just like a series of sketches. And they have Scottish accents. So for me, an American, it makes it extra hilarious. But their show, like, I'm not saying this to knock them or anything. I was the first person to rate their show. And they're not like big at all. But I got to tell you, the production value is amazing on this show. I mean, there's songs and there's really great interludes and there's really great sketch, but it's also hilarious. So I do want to recommend that. Beyond the Edge, a sequential entertainment podcast. And then the other one is called I'm Dying to Tell You. And let me get the name of the person who does that one. And it's someone who is dying of ALS. And
Ooh.
it's a woman, and she has a podcast kind of just about dealing with it. And oh yeah, Lori Carey. I'm Dying to Tell You by Lori Carey. And I listened to an episode that was actually about a couple in Sweden, I believe. the man in the couple is dying of ALS, and they talk about kind of how they had to explain it to their kids. But they also reached out to some people in Hollywood to make an animated short film about it. And they talked about that, and I can't remember the name of the short film or whatever. But anyway, it was really, really good. Pretty moving to listen to a podcast from someone who's dying, and their optimism about it. But anyway, we're going to switch gears here because this is a comedy show. So we're going to talk about bullshit now. And
Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit.
Our Yelp review.
Yelp review. Yelp review. Yeah.
Ka-chow.
Bam, bam. All right. So this Yelp review is for Mount Rushmore.
For Mount Rushmore. Ooh.
3 white sex offenders and a hero is what it should have been called. Of course, George Bush probably had to force all the India people out of West Dakota just to carve the stupid thing. I don't know what dope snorter was in charge of picking the faces of Mount Rushmore, but they should be set on fire. I know for a fact that George Washington had his wig especially made out of dead kids' hair. Thomas Jefferson's slaves all had their nipples removed. I said Jefferson on purpose because this thing was just
That's
full.
how he spelled it.
Thomas Jefferson's slaves all had their nipples removed because he hated the way black people nipples looked.
Wow.
And Teddy
Okay.
Roosevelt carried a satanic Bible with him filled with pictures of Robert E. Lee having relations with a horse.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, if I was in charge, not me personally, the reviewer, if I was in charge, I wouldn't have made the 4 carvings Abraham Lincoln's face, Abraham Lincoln's dick, Abraham Lincoln's nuts, and Abraham Lincoln's butt. Abraham Lincoln did more for this country than Martin King Lutheran Jr. and Rosetta Stone combined. And Alexander Hamilton would have been a better choice than that kid toucher Teddy Roosevelt. I was watching a show on History Channel, and it said that the mountain was actually carved by the ancient Egyptians by using the vibrations of their chants to influence the clouds to rain very particularly to erode the rock into the shape of the 4 presidents.
Was that ancient aliens they were watching, or?
It's on the History Channel, so it has to be
Yep.
correct, whatever it is.
Yep.
I guess the ancient Egyptians were fucking stupid to look into the future and think that George, Thomas, and Teddy were anything more than old, saggy nutsacks who just stood around a sweaty room in Washington, D.C., scribbling some nonsense on a papyrus or some shit. Also, dumb people on Yelp also complain about Mount Rushmore looking so small. It's because the Earth is actually 10 times rounder than people think, so you're actually looking at it from behind. Stupid people, please open your eyes. I don't know how to
not
rate.
a flat earther.
It's like the opposite.
Yeah.
Let's dwell on that for a moment.
Yeah.
It's because the Earth is actually 10 times rounder than people think. So you're actually looking at it from behind. It makes sense, Tommy.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Stupid people, please open your eyes. I don't know how to rate this out of 5 stars when there's only 4 people on the mountain. Dumb Yelp.
Almost giving Yelp itself a bad review right there.
Yeah.
Wow. Fun fact with the Mount Rushmore, it's the heads of the 4 presidents. They were also supposed to carve out their bodies, but I forgot if the guy died or if the project lost funding, and then they just said, well, good enough.
You mean the ancient Egyptians?
Yes.
They were supposed to carve out their chests, but they just stopped at the
Yes.
upper torso, I guess. I don't know,
No, they just stopped the heads. They only did the heads, and then left a pile of rubble and said, what, good enough.
I was supposed to see Mount Rushmore on a band trip once. We were driving from central Illinois all the way to Alberta, Canada, which is quite a drive. It's over 30 hours. And of course, me being from a small poor town, we couldn't afford airplanes, so we took a charter bus over 30 hours straight.
Whoa. To South Dakota.
No, to Alberta, Canada, which is even further west. And
Jeez.
obviously it's in Canada. But anyway, for some reason along the way, they were like, nah, we're not stopping at South Dakota. We got to keep going. And it ended up being a 36-hour bus ride because at one point we got lost. Yeah. So I never got to see Mount Rushmore, but I've actually heard it. Like this person says it looks small. I have heard that it looks really small when you're there.
I've heard that as well.
So I don't know. I wish the ancient Egyptians made those big pyramid things. I heard a conspiracy theory the other day that ancient Egypt is actually in North America. And the Great Pyramids of Giza are actually in Las Vegas.
That is interesting, and I want to know the thought process behind that conspiracy.
Now our visual podcast audience will know that I'm quite a Vegas fan. I've been there 5 times. I'm wearing a hat and a sweatshirt and actually a t-shirt underneath from Vegas. There is a pyramid there. It's a giant hotel. It was built in like the 80s or 90s. I should specify the 1980s or 1990s. And there's no ancient pyramids there. The same conspiracy theory said that the Mississippi River and the Colorado River, like together, were the Nile River.
Okay.
But at least we learned today that the Earth is 10 times rounder than we thought before, which I don't think is even possible.
I don't. It's like not even.
How can anything be rounder? How
Yeah.
can a sphere be? I guess it's not a sphere. It must be some other shape. I don't know.
Yeah. It's like some type of sphere, but there's mountains and elevations or something, so it's not a perfect sphere.
It's a rounder,
It's not.
extra round.
It's like yeah. I don't know if he's smarter or dumber than a flat Earth.
Yeah, it's hard to gauge. It's hard to
Yeah.
gauge things like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tommy, do you have any other nuggets to give us today?
No.
Well, I will talk us out of this this nightmare and say goodnight to all of our listeners. Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate it. We want to remind you to please leave a rating and review. You can do that on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, of course. We are trying to grow our YouTube channel right now, so go head over there, subscribe to that, hit the bell icon, hit the thumbs up, all that sort of thing. And if we wanted you to do one thing, we want you to just share this with one person. Okay? We know that you have some weird friends out there. Just tell them about this show. Tell one person about this show. We would really appreciate that. Tommy, good night.
Two useless organisms. Two useless organisms.